Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fan Sports Varsity. I'm your host, Frank Langella, joined by my co-host, Marcelio Langella. Mars, this is our Section 1AA Week 5 preview. We got 2 weeks left. Again, football's coming to an end, but again, we have a nice week of football. Talking about the 1AA, the big boys. And let's get it started, man.
Yeah, man, I'm ready to roll.
All right, and I do want to welcome our fans, and obviously if you guys tuning in, make sure you guys follow us on Instagram, make sure you guys follow us on Twitter. If you're new, we cover Section 1 football, and if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. But let's talk about the slate of games, Mars. There are 4 teams that the question is in the air whether they're going to be playing or not. I know Scarsdale had to go on pause, which was really upsetting. They were my number 5 ranked team, and my rankings are on Twitter, by the way. I know Fox Lane, they had to go. They lost their game. Marinick, I think, went on pause. So there are a few teams trying to find games right now. And so, again, we produced this show during the week, so it's hard to say they might pick up a game, but we might not be able to pick them. But let's talk about Mars. Yonkers Brave 0-2 at White Plains, who's 1-3. That's Friday. Another Friday, Carmel 3-1 at John Jay. East Fishkill 2-1. That's a very interesting rivalry there. Friday again, Suffern 3-1 at Neuse. That's 4-0. Really intriguing game. And then Saturday we got Arlington 2-2 at North Rockland, who's 1-2. And Saturday, Port Chester 1-3 at Yonkers Force. So that's the slate of games that we'll talk about. We're going to talk about 3 of them and pick all of them at the end. Let's start with a Saturday game. Arlington 2-2 at North Rockland, who's 1-2. And if you look at these two teams, Arlington 6-4 versus North Rockland since 2004. So pretty evenly matched, but recently Arlington has owned it. They've won 5 straight against North Rockland. And if you look last week, Arlington beat their rival RCK pretty badly. North Rockland got beat up by Somers pretty badly earlier this week. That's a tough game. But let's start with Arlington, Marcel. Offensively, I thought they really went back to their identity, and their identity is to control the line of scrimmage with their size up front, with their big boys who can move around some people and give a heavy dose of Finn and Grant. Both had, I believe, 3 touchdowns each, Mars. You know how much I like these running backs, especially Finn, like both of them. But they both had a really big game, and I'm expecting another heavy dose of those 2 guys. And I think they're going to pass out of favorable downs, right? So get nice chunk plays out of the run game, and then run play action, pass out of that, right? So quarterback Fortunato, I think he's going to have another solid, efficient game is what you want, right? You don't want him to carry the load. You want the offensive line to carry the load and him to throw out of it. This North Rockland defensive line, I think they will play better than what they did against Somers. I know Somers was able to run the ball pretty often on them, so I don't think it'll be as easy. But I do think Arlington can have an advantage running the ball, especially running off tackle. I think they have a size advantage, and I think that they should use it offensively. Defensively, again, North Rockland has become this year a passing team because they have a really solid quarterback and some weapons on the outside. So you're going to see there's going to be a heavy pressure on this Arlington secondary and linebackers to cover and tackle in space. One way you can help them, and we talked about this in previous shows, get some pressure up front. Right, so you want to see this defensive line try to create some pressure, and the big thing is don't let Rodriguez get outside of you because he is a dual threat guy who can hurt you with his legs. So keep him in the pocket and try to match up with these guys and try to create pressure internally. That would be probably the best course of action. Have those defensive ends kind of not so much spy, but make sure that you cup them inside is going to be big. But this secondary, they made some plays in recent weeks. Arlington, Lozito, he had an interception. Newman had 2 interceptions last week. This secondary has. Sometimes they've been hurt on big pass plays, and sometimes they've really stepped up and picked the ball up. You want to see that group that's aggressive and attacking the football. And I do want to give a shout-out to their kicker, Gibson. Marcy was 5-6 on extra points last week. He has 100 career points, so I did want to give a shout-out. That's a pretty big accomplishment, Mars. What's your thoughts on Arlington?
When you look at Arlington, they're definitely going to mix and match their offensive scheme. I feel like when they play best is when they try to run downhill and then they try to mix in some passes, efficient passes. Yeah. They try to move the chains, and I think that's exactly what they're going to do against North Rockland. I feel like, when you just watch them play, I feel like that's just the best method for them. Because I feel like they have just size up front, and I feel like when they're trying to get too fancy and like drift away from what really gets them to the dance, I feel like why? Just stick what you know best, stick what you has been getting your offense to move, and I just really fix the inefficiencies. And I feel like they have been doing that recently, and it's been really working for them. When you look at the defensive side of the ball, I feel like it's going to definitely be important for them to cause some mayhem in the backfield. I feel like definitely, like as you mentioned, create some contain and get some pass rush. I feel like making North Rockland have to think of a new strategy. I mean, especially make a big play when they're under pressure is definitely going to be in your favor, because the secondary has been playing a lot better recently. And I think that if you can really get North Rockland to kind of make a mistake, you can capitalize it. And I know that you'll definitely score some points or come away with some points with your high-powered offense.
North Rockland, Mars, offensively, it was tough. They had a tough game against Somers. The offensive line did struggle, and I think they need to improve and step up. Now, granted, I don't think Arlington, although they have good size and they have some playmakers on the defensive line, I don't think they have the same potency that Somers has. So I do think the O-line will play better, but they have to do a better job in pass protection. It starts with Manny Mena, who I really like on the line, and the rest of those guys to really step up and protect Mateo Rodriguez, their quarterback, who is their most dynamic offensive player. He can hurt them with hurt people with his leg, with his arm, and he's got some skill guys he could throw to. Carswell, Frazier, Becker, Kresbeck. I thought against Somers, they missed some plays that they normally make because they had some plays open. They just couldn't make them. And I don't think it's going to happen 2 weeks in a row. I think, obviously, North Rockland's got to make those plays happen against this Arlington team. It's going to be really tough to run the ball consistently against the size of Arlington. So they're going to try to pass the ball and use the passing game almost as like a run attack. And use Mateo Rodriguez's legs. So I do think the offense is going to try to create some big chunk plays in the pass game, try to be more efficient in the pass game than they were against Somers. And they're going to need to if they're going to have a chance to win this game. Defensively, this front seven needs to be physical. We talk about Arlington going back to its identity. I really think they're going to rely on it. They're going to try to run downhill with the size that they have and some tough runners in Finn and Grant. And so I'm looking at these linebackers are going to have to be really extra aggressive and attack the line of scrimmage. Do not wait, because this line, they're going to push the pile into you, and that's where bad things happen. So I'm looking at Carswell. I'm looking at Garifol. They're going to have to really be active in the run game and really attack the line of scrimmage. That's the best thing. You can't wait. You got to attack the line of scrimmage. You have to make the play at the line of scrimmage. So we're going to see if this defensive front seven can make those plays happen in this run game, Mars. What are your thoughts on North Rockland?
I mean, when you really watch their game against Somers, it was definitely a struggle. Yeah. And I, as you mentioned, the fact that Somers' defensive line in front in general was dominating. Yeah. And I think they need to kind of a bounce back game, and I think they will. I think when you look at high school sports, they definitely will not have two horrifying games 2 weeks in a row. I think the offensive line is definitely going to kind of wake themselves up after what happened and say we cannot allow this defensive line to do whatever they want against our offense. And I think they're going to make this a personal goal for themselves. And hey, you can take my words for it. Make this a personal goal for yourself. Do not allow yourselves to get blown off the ball, because you need to keep the line of scrimmage in your favor. Give your quarterback time. You give him as much time as possible to make those efficient throws. I mean, that's the way offenses work. You need to give your best playmakers some room, right? If you can do that, they will make the plays for you. When it comes to defensive side of the ball, line of scrimmage needs to be, like I said, in your favor. Same thing. So when you look at X factors here, it's going to be the offense and defensive line, in my opinion. I feel like offensive line needs to get a push. D-line needs to keep down pat. They need to keep the line in their favor. I'm
actually going to go with a different matchup, although I do like that one. I'm looking at this North Rockland pass attack and these receivers versus the secondary of Arlington, because I do think North Rockland has some talented guys in the passing game. I'm interested to see how this Arlington secondary plays versus them. Let's go to the next game, Mars. Carmel 3-1 at John Jay, who's 2-1. This is a classic league matchup going against each other. But if you look, Carmel has struggled against John Jay. John Jay is 10-4 versus Carmel since 2004, including a win in 2019. I think they've won 2 straight, actually, John Jay. But Carmel last week, they beat White Plains in dominating fashion. John Jay lost a tough game against a good Suffern team in overtime after their COVID pause. So, again, this is a really intriguing matchup to me, Mars. Let's start with Carmel. Offensively, last week, they were a heavy reliance in the run game, and boy, did it pay off. They ran with some power behind the offensive line. They brought in fullback. They brought in tight end. They really dominated up front, and they handed the ball and gave the biggest load to their running back, Massey, who has really been he's been really sensational so far this season. He's been really solid. He's been getting better every week. He does a really good job of running with good balance and good power. And I would imagine that they're going to rely on him again, but it's not going to be too easy against the bulk and the linebacker play of this John J. Fishkill. So I do think it'll open up opportunities for their quarterback and Dahl for outside runs and even some off-tackle stuff. I could see, Carmel giving heavy looks to run outside, Mars, to condense the defense so that they could try to beat him out on the edge. But I do think it'll open up things for the quarterback. It'll open up things for some of these receivers. And I do think Carmel's going to mix it up. That's what I think offensively. Defensively, the run game of John J. Fishkill is definitely improving. They're running the ball more efficiently. The offensive line is playing better. They have two backs who can run hard. I do think that Carmel's defensive line has a speed advantage versus John J. Fishkill's offensive line, and I do think they can cause some penetration. We know about their pass attack is very potent, so the secondary is really going to be tested again. They were tested last week. They did a pretty good job. They're going to be tested again with this pass attack, which is just as potent, maybe even more potent. But to me, you got to force Beal to stay in the pocket, Mars. He's not the tallest guy. I really like Beal. He's not the tallest guy. You want him to stay in between in the tackles. Try to get your hands up if you can't get to the quarterback, and you're gonna try to hurt his vision. He wants to get outside the pocket. He wants to make big throws with his arm. So the big thing is to prevent these big pass plays with these weapons. The secondary is going to have to match up against some good, talented guys. So it's going to be a really intriguing matchup. But the best way you can do it is get pressure, right, and play some good man coverage and good zone coverage. So that's going to be the big test for the secondary, Mars. What are your thoughts on Carmel?
Yeah, we look at Carmel, and we kind of mentioned this in the beginning of the year with Carmel. Coach Take is definitely going to have like a kitchen sink of formations that they're throwing at every defense, and that this definitely makes opposing defenses bug out because they don't know where the attack is coming from. And I think that they're going to follow in the same mindset against John Jay because John Jay also has good coaching, and I feel like it's going to be a battle of not even just the players themselves, but the coaches. I think it's going to be a very schematic type of matchup. And I think that when you look at Carmel, skill-wise, you need to target the outside because of the fact the front seven is very potent on John J. Fishkill. They're very strong. They can definitely play downhill. You need to kind of get to the outside. Force John Jay to try and match your speed. I think that's kind of the big thing with Carmel. Defensively, I mean, they've been playing very gritty, and I think that their advantage is going to be really about this pass rush. And I think that they need to try to get to Beal as much as possible. Yeah. But like you mentioned already, try to keep him on the inside. Yes. Make him feel the pressure and have to make a big throw.
When I look at John J. Fishkill offensively, Mars, historically, John J. Fishkill, we know about big linemen and running the ball. This year, they're a pass-first team, and we've seen that all season. And it's, they want to get the ball out to the weapons in space, and they want those weapons to make some plays. And it starts with their quarterback, Beal. Last week he had 3 touchdown passes, 239 yards passing, and he has weapons to get the ball to. We know about Ryan. He made a ridiculous catch last week. We know about Peyton. These are guys that are common theme guys. But a new guy came onto the scene last week, Jacob Balmos. He had a really nice game last week as well. That you're adding another weapon to this pass attack. And they even throw to their backs in Whalen and Crochet. But I got to talk about this offensive line because I do think that they've always been pretty solid at pass protection, but I think they've been improving in run blocking. Guys like Morrow and Kohowitz, they've allowed this offense to not be so one-dimensional anymore, and they can run the ball a little bit, but they can't allow penetration from this aggressive D-line of Carmel, or it's going to be a long day offensively. So it's going to be relying on this offensive line to handle the penetration and speed on the defense, especially on the defensive line. And to me, I'm thinking, we know they're going to throw the ball, Mars, but try to utilize the screen game. I think that's going to be big. When you face an aggressive defense like Carmel, you want to try to catch them on some screens and catch them on a little bit of misdirection. I think that's where a big plays can come from this offense. Defensively, you have to start off with stopping Massey. He has been the deadliest force for Carmel in recent weeks. You got to stop this rush attack. You got those 2 big boys you're always going to put over the guards. But to me, I'm looking at these defensive ends because the linebackers and the defensive tackles, I think, will do a solid job stopping the inside run. But these defensive ends cannot let the quarterback break contain because Dahl can really hurt you when he gets outside. Even when the jet sweeps to guys like Fiore can really hurt on the outside. So, these defensive ends and outside linebackers got to be very disciplined because Carmel has good speed. And I do think they have to trust their secondary to try to match up with these Carmel. Obviously, when they go into the spread looks, you're going to go into more coverage looks, right? But things are going to change. But when they come into heavy, you're going to have to rely on your secondary to try to play man coverage and try to stop this rush attack. And usually when they come into heavy, you got to be wary of them going outside. What are your thoughts, Morris, on John Jay's Fish?
I mean, John Jay has been a pretty dominant program for the past few years. And normally, as you mentioned, they're normally a team that just runs you over because they have this size and the speed that kind of matches it. But as you mentioned, now they're a pass first team. And I think that this is very different from what we're used to seeing with John Jay's Fishkill. But they've been very impressive at doing so. Beal has been very good this year, and I think that he's a very dynamic player. But on top of that, he just has so many weapons that surround him. And I think that that's what makes his offense so deadly. But the offensive line is definitely going to be the most important aspect of this team because, when it comes to not only just stopping pass penetration from Carmel's defensive line, but it's really going to be about setting the momentum forward. If you start out the game and Carmel has a big sack to really start off the drive, this could really shock John Jay, and it could cause the momentum to swing in Carmel's favor. So it really is going to depend on the offensive line to really keep momentum on their side. I think you want to try to limit the amount of time that Carmel has with the ball, so that means you need to have long, sustained drives and really try to wear out this defense of Carmel.
And Carmel will send stunts, and so that's why the big screen game could be big. You want to catch them on those stunts when they try to get pressure on you. But to me, Mars, I'm looking at this matchup. I'm looking at this John Jay's Fishkill offensive line versus the Carmel D-line. We both talked about it. I think this is going to be a big indicator on where this game goes, and if Suffern can maintain those long drives, it's going to be because that offensive line is playing well. Let's go to the game of the week, Mars. And this week's game of the week is my number 1 versus the number 2 team in my power rankings. I have Suffern 3-1, the number 2 ranked team, at Neuse, who's 4-0. This is a really intriguing matchup. They've only played each other once since 2004. Neuse won in 2013. But if you look at last week, Suffern beat John Jay in overtime, which was a big program victory, another week after beating Carmel. And Neuse beat Portchester. And, let's just start with Suffern, right? The away team. Offensively, they're going to mix a few things at you. They're going to throw the Wildcat at you where Lubin's at the quarterback spot, give you some heavy looks, run outside, run off tackle. They'll go into double wing offense. They'll go into some spread. They'll mix it up. They'll throw some things at you, and I think they're going to have to mix it up against Neuse. But it has to start with this offensive line and tight ends. If you want to run the ball consistently, and we know Lubin's going to get a heavy dose of carries, this offensive line and the tight ends are going to have to block the best they've done all season against this Neuse defensive line and linebackers. If they're going to have a chance to win, it's going to have to be the offensive line's best game of the season. And that's what it's going to be. That's what the task is at them. We know the offense is going to run through Lubin. And then off of all that stuff, off of the Lubin action, that's going to be the time, that you want to throw the kitchen sink. You mentioned Todd K throwing the kitchen sink. Suffern's going to have to throw the kitchen sink, right? Throw the counters. If you have screen plays, use them. Trick plays. This is the time to use it. Because Neuse has elite speed, right? And they're an aggressive defense. So you need to catch them being over-aggressive, and you got to hit these plays if you're going to have a chance, because it's going to be hard to just have sustained drives against Neuse unless your offensive line dominates, which in history is not common. So, you're going to have to hit those trick plays. You're going to have to hit those counters, misdirections. And quarterback Risco, I think I thought he had a solid game last week. He's going to have to make some plays in the passing game, and someone he could try to rely on is Sam Joseph, who had a good game last week. He has that game-breaking speed. Defensively, Mars, it's all about preventing the big play. Neuse is a tough matchup. They have big linemen who can block, and they have backs, once they get into open field, will hit the home run. And the mind focus is on Colin Jennings, because this guy, he's one of the best off-tackle runners in the class, could be the best. He runs with some solid power, but once he gets to that second level, he's gone. No one's going to touch him. And then there's another guy, Gary Phillips, on the edge, the jet sweeps, the bubbles. So you have to be able to tackle well in open space. But to me, the focus, you have to swarm to the ball, Mars. This is going to be the best rallying game you have to have, because you have to have hats to the ball. Because these guys, if you're expecting one guy to take them down, you're going to have big trouble. But I'm looking at these edge guys, Mars. I'm looking at the defensive line and Krebs to try to create penetration. I'm looking at these edge guys in Lubin and Yang, and these outside linebackers are going to have to be extremely active in this game, and they're going to have to make some plays in space. And the secondary of Suffern, Mars, they have forced turnovers the last few weeks. Rogers had an interception last week. Benedetto, he had a pick 2 weeks ago. Joseph had an INT. Right, this secondary has shown that if you can get them passing the ball, and although Neuse has some weapons passing the game and the quarterback has done a better job over recent weeks, your best chance is for them to become a passing team. That's Suffern's best chance, Mars. What are your thoughts on Suffern? Excuse me.
Well, when you look at Suffern, I think they have a nice mix on the offense. I think they have some power. They have some spread. definitely is a good mixture between the two, and they do have a star power in Lubin that definitely gets them moving the ball. And really, the question is going to be how well does this offensive line perform against New Rochelle? And if you've ever played against New Rochelle, you know that the front is always going to be aggressive, and they're going to be set. They're going to show their presence. And as you mentioned already, this has to be the biggest game for the offensive line of Suffern. If they can perform really well and give Lubin space and allow him to make a play, I think it's going to be a very interesting showdown here. But in my opinion, it has to be along with other weapons. I mean, Lubin can't take on the load.
He's done a really good job so far.
He's done a really good job. Yeah, but I just that's the point, is that he's done it a very good job against a lot of other teams. But New Rochelle is like a different animal. You need to kind of have a full team win against them in order to become victorious.
And Suffern has done that versus Carmel and East Fishkill. You've seen a group effort, and that's why they've had those big program victories.
Exactly, and that has to happen again. I mean, this has to be an all-around big-time victory from everybody on the team, because New Rochelle just has so much firepower, and that's what kind of goes right into the defense. Specifically, just looking at some of these guys like Colin Jennings, Gary Phillips, these guys are deadly, especially when they come to their speed and getting to the outside. So the question is going to be, can the front seven limit the big plays, and can they stop the outside runs? Can they force everything to the inside, into the junk? And if they can do that, it allows the defense to try to slow down some of these speedsters. Yeah.
And going to New Rochelle, Mars, I think offensively, they're going to play their game, but I think the big focus is attacking off tackle and on the edge, because you want to see if these if these linebackers can tackle and run in space. That's what you want to see. You want to get these guys in space and see if they can match your speed, which I think you have the advantage of. I think you're going to see a heavy dose of Jennings. It's going to be a heavy Jennings day, in my opinion. I think Jennings is a dynamic football player, and I think they're going to rely on him to win this type of big game. But I also think they have a nice complement to him, who's been playing well in recent weeks, running the ball at least. Really both sides of the ball, but I'm going to focus running, is Arari. He runs with some power too, and he does some good off-tackle stuff and catches the ball out of the backfield. So he's a good downhill runner as well. I really think that they can try to attack off-tackle and then get on the jet sweeps and the bubbles to guys like Gary Phillips, go into that play action to guys like Gregory, and with their quarterback, who's definitely been throwing the ball better. I just think if New Rochelle plays a clean game and they just stick with their offense and trying to get in space, they'll hit some big plays and they'll put up some points. I think this offense has the firepower and speed that if they could just break contain and get that opportunity. But don't give Suffern hope, right? Don't have turnovers. Don't have stupid penalties. Play a clean game. I think you'll have the advantage. Defensively, Mars, this is the number 1-2 defense in 1AA. New Rochelle is going to be scheming, and their eyes are going to be stopping Lubin's rush attack. So, I think Suffern will come into some heavy looks to try to condense the defense and then try to run off tackle and run outside. It'll be tough running outside on this New Rochelle speed, but if they can get Suffern into second and third and long and force the ball into the young quarterback's hands, this will allow their outside linebackers and defensive ends and Massey and Gregory to rush the passer and these secondary guys to become ball hawks. And we've seen that before. A guy like Caden Smith had an interception touchdown this year. These guys can make plays on the ball. If Suffern is in a bunch of second and third and longs and they're throwing over 15 times, New Rochelle's probably up and up big. So Suffern wants to run the ball, control the clock. If they're throwing a bunch of times, I think New Rochelle is going to be in pretty good favors. Mars, what are your thoughts on New Rochelle?
When you look at their offense, they just have so many weapons. I mean, that's the biggest thing you have to take across from this offense is that their speed is what kills teams the most. And anytime you allow them to get to the outside, they're going to make a big play, get a big chunk play. And I think that's what they're gambling on. They're going to gamble that, you know what, you might stop us once, you might stop us twice, but that third time, I think we're going to get you on that big play. And I think they're just going to keep trying to test the outside run and bet that they can win that one-on-one matchup with whether it's a linebacker or a contained player of some sort. And I think they're gonna keep attacking that same method because the offensive line has been dominating too. But I just think that the speed of New Rochelle is just too much for a lot of teams. Defensively, I mean, they've always been aggressive. They've always found a way to kind of maul offensive lines, especially when it comes to the pass. They have to kind of follow in that same mantra. They need to get really force Lubin to not be the one that moves the ball. Really force, like you said, those third and long scenarios, and they need to capitalize on either having a sack or forcing a turnover.
Yeah.
I mean, whenever a Neuse player gets a turnover, it's a watch out play, because they always find a way to not only get the turnover, but they can always find a way to take it back to the house. And I think that's going to be really important for them, is to really make Suffern be inefficient in their play calling.
And when I look at the matchup, Mars, I'm looking at these Suffern defensive ends and linebackers versus the New Rochelle backs. There's going to be a lot of try to plays that you're going to have to make off tackle and make in space, and we're going to see who comes out on top. But that's going to be the big matchup. And to me, the player to watch, Mars, and I think he's had an underrated year, is the running back and linebacker Izarari from New Rochelle. I think at the linebacker spot, Lubin's going to get the ball, and this is one of the guys who's going to be meeting him at the line of scrimmage very often. So obviously he's going to have a big performance, and I think he will. And running the ball, he's been a pretty good compliment to Colin Jennings, and I think he's had an underrated season. I think it continues in this game, that he has a good game. Ready for the game picks, Mars?
Yeah, I'm ready to roll, man.
All right, let's do it. Mars, Yonkers Brave 0-2 at White Plains, who's 1-3. I'm going to go with White Plains. I know White Plains defense really struggled against Carmel, especially stopping the run. But Yonkers Brave has a bunch of injuries, especially at the quarterback spot. And I do think White Plains defense will bounce back. I do think their pass attack will hit some big plays, and I could see another big game from McGuire. The teams can get something going on Yonkers Brave, especially when the offense struggles and turns the ball over. It'll open up more opportunities for White Plains offense. I think they win this game.
Yeah, I'm gonna go White Plains too. I feel like their offense is very good, especially when it comes to the pass. I think they had a tough game against Carmel. I mean, Carmel kind of threw everything at them, and obviously
they ran down their throat.
Yeah, no, but I meant like they had all these different formations and everything. But I think White Plains is gonna have a bounce back game. As I mentioned, in high school football, it's really hard to have two straight bad losses, and I think White Plains is going to have a bounce back win here. I'm going White Plains.
I do like Yonkers Brave, Kane and Needham. I thought that they both been playing pretty hard, but I do think White Plains has too much. Let's go to the next game, Mars. Portchester 1-3 at Yonkers Forest, who's 1-1. Mars, I'm actually going to go Yonkers Forest. I think the J&J dynamic at fullback, with Cordero running on the edge, has been pretty solid for this team. I do like Portchester's grittiness. Guys like Marte, guys like Escobar, guys like Jordan. They have some grit to them. And I do think this is going to be a very close game. And on offense, Portchester running with Santiago and Taylor could cause some issues, but I do think Forest has the size advantage up front. And I do think that they'll make enough plays, scheme out some plays, and run the ball and control this clock. And I think Yonkers Forest wins a close one, but I'm going to go Yonkers Forest.
Yeah, I'm going to go Yonkers Forest too. I really like the way that their skill players have been playing recently. I did get called out for my pick last week. And
Jackson put on a show, man.
Jackson did put on a show, and he definitely made me eat my words last week. So I'm going to go with him this week. And I think that he's going to have another good game. I'm going with Forest.
Well, Jakeem Jordan called us out a couple weeks ago for Portchester that we picked wrong. So we've been called out on both sides. But again, much respect to both teams. Let's go to Arlington, 2-2 at North Rockland, who's 1-2. I'm going to go with Arlington. I really like the way Arlington played last week. And I don't think, 2-2 is not a bad record, right? You're 500. I think Arlington's better than the 2-2 record. I think they played two really tough teams in Carmel and Cornwall. So I do think Arlington's better. I do think they win because of the upfront size advantage that they have. I also think, I think the run game is going to put too much pressure on North Rockland's offense to put up some points. I think they turn the ball over a little bit. I'm going Arlington, Mars.
Yeah, I'm going to go Arlington too. I just feel like they have a better chance of doing more than just one thing. And I feel like the fact that they have an advantage up front allows them to kind of control the momentum of the game, control the pace. And I think Arlington's going to have, if you really look at the minutes of possession, they're going to have a long time with the ball. And I think they're going to win this game.
Let's go Carmel 3-1 at John J. East Fishkill, who's 2-1. This one was a really hard one for me to pick, Mars. I'm not exactly sure which way I wanted to lean for most of the night, but at the end, I decided to go with Carmel. I think Carmel's going to win this game on the road. I know East Fishkill's kind of had Carmel's number, but I got to tell you, it's tough. That overtime loss against Suffern is a really tough one, and I'm interested to see how that team bounces back. I do think these Carmel young guys continue to progress and continue to grow. It would not shock me if this game is tight all the way into the fourth quarter. If it does, obviously you'd be feeling good if you're East Fishkill because Beal tends to make big-time plays at that moment. But I just think Carmel, offensively, I think they'll control the clock a little bit. I think they'll hit some plays on the outside. I really like this East Fishkill team. but I just think Carmel has a little bit too much, and I'm going to go with Carmel.
I go with John Jay's fish skill. I feel like when you looked at the game against Suffern, I mean, it was a fight, right? And it was a battle, but remember what Suffern did to Carmel, and I think that John Jay might have found that what it was that really allowed them to have such a battle against Suffern. I think they're going to try to follow in that same mindset. I think Carmel is one of the very most talented teams in this class, and I think that they had a big time comeback, a big rebound win against White Plains. But I think that John Jay, I think, is going to try to, because they also need a new rebound win, and I think that they're going to try to throw the whole sink at Carmel. And Carmel is just, I think, a younger team against a team that more veterans on it.
Yeah.
I think it's just going to be a tough one. I think the offensive line of John Jay's fish skill is definitely going to step up. They're going to stop the pass rush, and they're going to allow for Beal to really make a lot of big-time plays.
Well, good news for you. I'm 1-3 picking Carmel games, so that might not be great that I picked Carmel. But let's go to the game of the week, Mars. Suffern 3-1 at Neuse 4-0. These were my two number 1 and number 2 teams in 1AA for this week. And I'll let you go first, Mars. Who wins and why? Does Suffern pull off the biggest upset in probably their program's history, or does Neuse continue to be the top dog?
When you look at Suffern, I mean, this is definitely a team, and I remember you kind of were pointing to this Suffern team being the best they've
for the season.
Yeah, one of the best Suffern teams I
was a believer.
Been a believer since day one.
One of the better teams they've had. Yes.
And I remember when we were first looking up a lot of this information about Suffern, and I was surprised at how good they were going to be based on like a lot of your research that you had when you were telling me about this team going through the offseason. And they really have been performing to that level, and their offensive line has been clicking off fronts. You see the playmakers have been playing. I mean, Lubin is definitely a next level talent. I mean, yes. You can tell. I mean, he's just been all over the place offensively and defensively, and they've just been doing so much on both ways. Neuse. I mean, they have so many skilled players on this offense. They have a lot of top-notch defenders on this team, a lot of speed, and just a lot of players that can just burn you if you give them a chance. And I feel like this is definitely a matchup that's so difficult to make a decision. But I'm going to go with Neuse. I mean, Neuse has, in my opinion, I feel like has had the luxury of playing against teams that, not saying bad teams or anything, but teams that haven't been on the same level as they have been. And I think that, Suffern has been through the gauntlet. And that's what we used to always call it back in AA, the gauntlet. And they've been fighting against top-notch teams, John Jay, Carmel, Arlington, yeah. These top-notch teams, and they've been battling it out, and they've been successful. But at a certain point, the players have just been a little bit beat up. Neuse, I feel like, has for the past few weeks have been coasting. Now, granted, I think at the beginning of the game, Neuse is going to get surprised. I think they're going to get shocked by Suffern and how well they play. But I think Neuse is going to wake up by halftime and say, "Wait, we're Neuse. Wait, we can win this game." And I think they're going to start getting to the outsides. They're going to start wearing down Suffern with these big plays, because all it takes is one mistake, and all of a sudden you have Colin Jennings running down the sidelines. Right, so I think Neuse is going to win this game.
Listen, I think this could be a big opportunity for Suffern to really make a statement in a tough year that everyone's had in COVID season. Probably have an opportunity to have the biggest win in program history. We obviously know there's no playoffs, so this is going to be an opportunity. This is kind of like the Super Bowl for Suffern, and I'm interested to see how they come out and play. I do think that they've been improving, and I do think that they have a grittiness and toughness. And they're the team that I believed in the offseason to be one of the more talented teams in 1AA, and they have proven that to be correct. It would not shock me if Suffern gets up in this game, and if Suffern keeps this very close, like you mentioned, for a long period of time. But there's a saying, the great Ric Flair, to be the man, you got to beat the man. And we haven't seen a team do that to Neuse and beat the man in a while, especially at Neuse. And that, to me, is going to be the difference in this game. I'm going with Neuse. I do think the game gets close for a while, but I agree with you. I think Neuse wakes up. I think they pull away in the fourth, and I think Neuse is going to win this game. All right, everyone, that was our show. We appreciate everyone for tuning in. We hope you guys have a safe and sports-filled weekend. We'll see you all very soon.